In a nation built on dreams of home ownership, Singapore's million-dollar HDB flats have become both a badge of success and a silent trap. Jack Ma issues a powerful warning: wealth built on walls is an illusion, and the true danger lies not in losing money, but in losing freedom. As property prices soar and debt deepens, he challenges Singaporeans to ask, are we owning our homes or are our homes owning us? The answer could redefine the future of Asia's middle class. For decades, owning a home in Singapore has been seen as the ultimate symbol of success, a golden ticket to middle-class security and respectability. Families pour their savings, their CPF, and their dreams into securing a housing and development board, flat, believing it's both a roof over their heads and a safe financial investment. But as Jack Ma insightfully points out, this belief often masks a dangerous illusion, an illusion of wealth that traps rather than liberates. When a home's value climbs to $1 million, it feels like success. Newspaper headlines and social media posts celebrate record-breaking HDB sales, fueling the belief that property ownership is the path to riches. Yet, in reality, most Singaporeans never realize that wealth, the million-dollar figure, exists only on paper. Unless you sell the flat and significantly downgrade your living situation, that value stays locked within walls and tiles, unusable, illiquid, and often heavily mortgaged. Jack Ma emphasizes that this illusion leads to complacency. When people believe their property makes them rich, they stop seeking real growth opportunities. They become risk-averse, reluctant to invest in new businesses, learn new skills, or explore innovation. The home becomes both a comfort zone and a cage, a psychological barrier to progress. In Ma's words, wealth should flow and grow, not sit idle in concrete. The illusion also creates a social mirage. Many Singaporeans associate home ownership with social prestige. A larger or newer flat signals success, while renting or living in smaller spaces may be viewed as lesser. This societal pressure drives people to take bigger loans than they can comfortably afford. Over time, that debt becomes a silent master, dictating career choices and lifestyle decisions. People stay in jobs they dislike just to pay off their mortgage, suppressing their creativity and potential. Moreover, this overconfidence in property values can distort financial judgment. When the majority of a household's net worth is tied up in a single asset, diversification disappears. Any downturn in the property market or the eventual decline in HDB lease values can drastically erode perceived wealth. Jack Ma draws parallels to China's property boom, where millions believed real estate could only rise. When the bubble corrected, many found themselves over-leveraged, their assets turning into liabilities overnight. The illusion of wealth also carries long-term generational effects. Parents often encourage their children to buy property as soon as possible, reinforcing the idea that real estate is the safest investment. But with prices soaring, younger Singaporeans are forced to take on enormous debts just to catch up. Instead of building flexible, innovative financial portfolios, they lock themselves into decades of repayment. Jack Ma's warning is simple but profound. True wealth is not measured by the price of your home, but by your ability to create, adapt, and grow. $1 million flat may make you look rich, but it can also limit your financial freedom. Real prosperity lies in developing skills, ideas, and businesses that multiply over time, not in clinging to the illusion of value built on borrowed money and concrete walls. In Singapore, the pursuit of home ownership has become almost a national rite of passage, a symbol of stability, adulthood, and success. But behind that dream lies a sobering truth. Many families are trapped in decades-long mortgages that quietly drain their freedom, creativity, and financial potential. Jack Ma, reflecting on Asia's obsession with property, warns that when homes become too expensive, they no longer serve as a foundation for growth. They become a lifelong debt burden. For most Singaporeans, buying an HDB flat is not just a financial decision, it's a moral and social expectation. Young couples feel immense pressure to purchase a home soon after marriage, often stretching their finances to the limit to afford one in a desirable location. While government schemes and CPF savings make this seem manageable, the reality is that many end up servicing loans that can last 25 to 30 years. This long-term debt becomes a chain that ties them to predictable jobs and limits their ability to take risks, whether starting a business, changing careers, or taking time to upskill. Jack Ma often highlights that true economic vitality comes from people who dare to take risks. However, when every paycheck is pre-committed to a mortgage, the courage to innovate disappears. A heavily indebted society becomes cautious and rigid, and that rigidity stifles entrepreneurship. In essence, the dream of a home gradually transforms into a trap that suppresses ambition. The irony, as Ma points out, is that the more people believe property equals wealth, the deeper they fall into the debt cycle. They take on massive loans under the assumption that property prices will always rise and that future income will keep pace with expenses. But when economic growth slows or job markets shift, those assumptions crumble. Mortgage repayments don't shrink when the economy contracts. Families who once felt wealthy find themselves barely keeping up with monthly bills. This debt culture also affects mental well-being. The constant pressure to meet financial obligations creates stress, anxiety, and a sense of being stuck. People may measure their worth not by happiness or purpose, but by the value of their homes. Over time, this erodes the quality of life that homeownership was supposed to bring in the first place. Jack Ma's insight extends beyond Singapore. It's a reflection of modern Asia's broader financial psychology. In his view, the region's fixation on property as a form of safe investment has diverted energy and resources away from innovation and technology. When families pour everything into mortgages, less capital flows into startups, education, or new ventures. The result is an economy strong on assets but weak on imagination. To break free from this debt trap, Ma suggests a shift in mindset. Homes should be places of comfort, not symbols of financial achievement. People must learn to prioritize liquidity, flexibility, and growth over ownership at any cost. It's better to live in a modest home with room to dream than in a $1 million flat that owns you more than you own it. Ultimately, the true measure of success lies not in how much property you can afford, but in how much freedom you retain after paying for it. Jack Ma's message is clear. Debt should never be the price of dignity, and owning a home should never mean giving up the freedom to live fully. One of the most overlooked truths about Singapore's housing market is that HDB flats, no matter how expensive, are not perpetual assets. They come with a 99-year lease, and as Jack Ma emphasizes, time is the one thing that silently erodes all illusions of everlasting value. What many Singaporeans call their $1 million home is, in fact, a leasehold property that depreciates with every passing year. The dream of lifelong wealth tied to property ownership eventually fades as reality catches up with time. When a home is new, the sense of ownership feels powerful. Families feel proud, believing they've invested in a solid, appreciating asset. For the first few decades, prices may even rise, especially in prime locations. But as the lease clock ticks down from 99 years to 70, 60, then 40, the market begins to change its perception. Potential buyers start worrying about the remaining lease, banks become hesitant to provide long-term financing, and resale values begin to decline. What was once a $1 million flat gradually becomes harder to sell, and its paper value starts to vanish. Jack Ma's point resonates deeply here. Wealth built on something that depreciates with time is not real wealth. In contrast to productive investments like businesses, technology, or skills which can compound and grow, real estate with a finite lease is a wasting asset. Yet, many Singaporeans still anchor their retirement hopes to the value of their property, assuming it will hold or even increase. This creates a dangerous financial illusion that may collapse when homeowners need liquidity the most. The shrinking value also creates a generational divide. Older Singaporeans who bought their flats decades ago may have enjoyed appreciation, but younger generations entering the market today face the opposite trend. They are paying record prices for properties with shorter remaining leases, effectively buying into a declining asset. This transfer of financial burden from one generation to the next has long-term social consequences, especially when young families find themselves unable to afford new homes or recover the full value of their investments later in life. Jack Ma often talks about how societies that rely too heavily on real estate end up with frozen capital, money that could have been used for innovation, education, or entrepreneurship becomes trapped in walls that lose value every year. In the long run, this stagnates not just personal finances but national progress. The economy becomes asset-rich but cash-poor, stable on the surface, yet brittle underneath. There is also a psychological impact. Homeowners may cling to the illusion of stability, reluctant to confront the decline in value. The fear of losing perceived wealth can discourage people from making bold financial decisions or pursuing new opportunities. But as Jack Ma notes, recognizing reality is the first step to freedom. Once people understand that property is a depreciating asset, they can redirect their focus toward building assets that appreciate through innovation, creativity, and enterprise. In the end, the million-dollar dream is only as strong as its foundation. And when that foundation is time-bound, its strength fades. Jack Ma's warning is clear. Never mistake ownership for security. The true value of a home lies not in its market price, but in the life it enables you to live. Investing in your skills, adaptability, and ideas will always outlast the ticking clock of a 99-year lease. The dream of home ownership in Singapore has long been a source of national pride, a symbol of progress, stability, and the promise that hard work will be rewarded with a home to call one's own. But as Jack Ma observes, beneath this powerful narrative lies a quiet but growing problem. A generational burden that traps younger Singaporeans in a cycle of debt, pressure, and diminishing freedom. What was once considered a foundation for family prosperity has, over time, evolved into a heavy financial and emotional weight carried by the next generation. For many young Singaporeans, the journey toward owning a home begins not with excitement, but with anxiety. Prices of HDB flats, even those meant to be affordable, have soared to levels that require massive loans and long-term commitments. A couple in their late 22nd or early 32nd often finds themselves taking out a 25 or 30-year mortgage, pledging decades of income toward a single asset. While this may seem like a normal part of life, Jack Ma warns that such early financial entanglement severely limits one's ability to explore, take risks, and innovate. When every decision must revolve around monthly repayments, creativity becomes a luxury. This generational pressure is not just financial, it's cultural. Older generations, having benefited from Singapore's early housing boom, often encourage their children to follow the same path, insisting that buying property is the ultimate mark of responsibility. Yet, the economic landscape has changed dramatically. The opportunities that once existed, low housing prices, rapid growth, and stable long-term value, are no longer the same. Still, young people are expected to play by the old rules, even when those rules no longer serve them. This expectation creates a deep psychological burden, a fear of falling behind, of being judged for renting, or of not living up to family standards. Jack Ma highlights how such cultural expectations can paralyze entire generations. When people feel trapped by inherited norms, they stop questioning whether those norms still make sense. In Singapore's case, the idea that you must buy a home to be successful has become so ingrained that few pause to ask whether it's truly the best path to freedom and financial growth. As a result, many young families sacrifice flexibility and future opportunities in exchange for the temporary validation that comes with ownership. The ripple effects of this burden extend far beyond individual families. When young people are weighed down by housing loans, they tend to avoid taking risks. Fewer startups are born, fewer ideas are tested, and innovation slows. A society built on fear of failure becomes one that merely maintains rather than creates. Jack Ma warns that this mindset, if left unchecked, can lead to economic stagnation. A population that works tirelessly, not for dreams, but for debt. Ultimately, the silent generational burden is not about homes, it's about the cost of inherited expectations. Jack Ma's message is a call to rethink what true security means. For the younger generation, freedom may no longer lie in ownership, but in adaptability, the ability to pursue passions, build skills, and seize opportunities without being chained to a mortgage. The real legacy to pass on is not property, but possibility. Jack Ma has long warned that when a nation becomes overly dependent on real estate as a measure of success, it risks suffocating the very innovation that sustains its long-term growth. Singapore's remarkable economic story has been built on foresight and resilience, but the growing obsession with property ownership now presents a hidden vulnerability. When too much national wealth is tied up in real estate, the economy may appear prosperous on the surface, yet it becomes fragile underneath, unable to adapt swiftly to new opportunities. The core of Ma's message is simple. Property does not create productivity. Unlike technology, entrepreneurship, or innovation, real estate generates limited multiplier effects. When individuals and families pour the majority of their savings into buying homes, they effectively lock their money into static assets. This means less capital circulates into businesses, startups, and creative ventures, the true engines of a modern economy. Over time, this imbalance can slow growth, reduce competitiveness, and make the economy heavily reliant on property prices for a sense of wealth. Singapore, like many developed economies, faces the danger of what economists call asset-heavy stagnation. When property prices rise faster than incomes, households feel wealthier but are actually poorer in liquidity. This illusion of prosperity drives consumption and confidence in the short term, but it leaves little room for reinvestment and innovation. Jack Ma has seen this pattern unfold in parts of China, where decades of property-driven growth eventually crowded out new business creation and made the economy less dynamic. He warns that Singapore, despite its prudence, is not immune to the same trap. Moreover, the government's fiscal resources are also indirectly tied to property. As land values increase, public revenues benefit through taxes and fees, creating an incentive to maintain high property prices. But this, too, comes at a cost. Affordable housing becomes harder to sustain, and the younger generation feels increasingly disconnected from the Singapore dream. Over time, this can erode social harmony and widen inequality, as those who entered the property market early accumulate wealth, while latecomers struggle to catch up. Jack Ma's insights also touch on the psychological dimension of economic stagnation. When property ownership becomes the dominant goal of society, people begin to think conservatively. They work to protect what they own rather than to create something new. This mentality, the fear of losing one's home or value, breeds caution and suppresses entrepreneurship. As Ma often says, when everyone is protecting their castle, no one is building the future. In an innovation-driven world, such a mindset is dangerous. A healthy economy requires fluid capital money moving through ideas, investments, and industries that evolve with time. Property, on the other hand, traps wealth in physical form, producing comfort but little growth. Jack Ma suggests that Singapore should continue encouraging diversification, promoting startups, digital industries, education, and research as alternative pathways to prosperity. Only by redirecting focus from ownership to innovation can the nation maintain its dynamism. Ultimately, Ma's warning is not anti-property, it's pro-freedom. He reminds us that homes should serve people, not dominate their financial destiny. A nation's true strength lies in its ability to generate new ideas, not just new buildings. If Singapore can balance its housing success with a renewed commitment to creativity and entrepreneurship, it will not just preserve its prosperity, it will future-proof it. Behind Singapore's gleaming skyline and million-dollar HDB flats lies an emotional story that often goes untold, the quiet pressure to measure one's worth by one's address. In a society where success is closely tied to home ownership, many Singaporeans have internalized the belief that the kind of home they own reflects their value as individuals. Jack Ma cautions that when housing becomes a status symbol rather than a necessity, it starts to take a deep psychological toll, eroding happiness, family peace, and even mental well-being. From a young age, Singaporeans are conditioned to see property as a milestone of adulthood. The message is clear: buy a home and you've made it. But as housing prices climb, this expectation becomes less about comfort and more about competition. Couples stretch their finances to secure homes in desirable districts or with better resale potential, even if it means years of financial strain. They convince themselves that it's worth it because everyone else is doing the same. Yet, beneath that social conformity lies a growing anxiety, the constant fear of not keeping up. Jack Ma observes that this emotional pressure can lead to a cycle of quiet suffering. When people equate their self-worth with their home's market value, their peace of mind becomes hostage to the property market. A dip in prices, a costly renovation, or a missed mortgage payment can trigger deep insecurity. Instead of homes being sanctuaries of rest, they become symbols of stress. The focus shifts from living comfortably to maintaining appearances, from building a life to paying for an image. The toll extends to family relationships as well. Many young couples delay having children, change career paths, or forego passions because their mortgage dictates their choices. Conversations about love and dreams are replaced by discussions about interest rates, loan tenures, and renovation budgets. Over time, this financial pressure breeds tension, resentment, and exhaustion. What was meant to be a happy achievement, owning a home, turns into a silent emotional burden that weighs on every decision. Jack Ma draws a broader lesson from this. Societies that link identity to possessions lose sight of what truly matters. In his view, happiness and success should come from purpose, not property. He reminds people that status-driven housing creates an illusion of stability, but often leads to spiritual emptiness. When people live for the validation of others, they lose connection with their inner aspirations, the drive to create, to learn, to grow. Moreover, this emotional cost ripples through the community. When everyone is focused on showing success rather than sharing it, empathy declines. Neighbors become competitors, and the collective spirit that once defined Singapore's housing vision weakens. The original purpose of HDB, to build inclusive, cohesive communities, is overshadowed by the pursuit of prestige. Jack Ma's message is both a warning and an invitation. He urges Singaporeans to redefine success beyond property lines, to focus on joy, relationships, and purpose instead of external validation. A home should be a space of peace, not pressure, a reflection of love, not status. The true luxury, he reminds us, is not the size of one's flat, but the freedom to live without fear of judgment. Only when society learns to detach identity from real estate can it rediscover the emotional balance that wealth alone can never buy. At the heart of Jack Ma's message lies a call for transformation, a challenge to rethink what it means to be wealthy, successful, and secure in the modern world. In the context of Singapore's housing obsession, Ma argues that it's time to shift from the static pursuit of material assets, like property, toward the dynamic creation of real value through skills, innovation, and entrepreneurship. His warning is clear: societies that anchor their dreams to walls and land will eventually find themselves trapped by their own success, while those that invest in adaptability and creativity will thrive in the future. Jack Ma's perspective comes from experience. Having witnessed China's property boom and its eventual correction, he understands the consequences of tying personal and national wealth to real estate. He often reminds people that true wealth is not built on ownership, but on evolution. The ability to create something new, to solve problems, and to adapt when the world changes. Money may buy you comfort, Ma once said, but it cannot buy the ability to think differently. This, he believes, is the key lesson. Singapore and the rest of Asia must internalize before it's too late. For Singaporeans, this new mindset means redefining the meaning of success. Instead of celebrating the record sale of $1 million HDB flat, the nation should celebrate the birth of a new startup, an innovative idea, or a breakthrough in education or sustainability. Property provides stability, yes, but it does not create movement, and movement is the essence of progress. Jack Ma encourages people to shift their aspirations from being owners of things to being creators of value. That, he says, is how real prosperity endures. He also stresses the importance of investing in oneself in knowledge, creativity, and resilience. These are assets that never depreciate. A house may lose value over time, but skills and ideas can multiply endlessly. In a rapidly changing global economy shaped by artificial intelligence, climate change, and digital disruption, those who cling to traditional measures of wealth will be left behind. The winners of tomorrow will be those who can think differently, act boldly, and adapt quickly, traits that no mortgage or property can guarantee. Moreover, Ma's message goes beyond economics. It is deeply philosophical. He challenges societies to ask a simple question: what are we really working for? If the goal of life is reduced to owning a house, then people become prisoners of their possessions. But if the goal is to create, contribute, and grow, then every step, even failure, becomes meaningful. This mindset frees individuals from fear and empowers them to pursue passions that lead to collective progress. In essence, Jack Ma's call is for liberation from the illusion of wealth tied to property, from the fear of risk, and from the outdated belief that security can only come from ownership. He envisions a generation that values innovation over inheritance, impact over image, and purpose over possessions. Singapore, with its intelligence, stability, and entrepreneurial spirit, has the perfect foundation to lead this shift. The $1 million HDB dream, he implies, should evolve into something greater, a dream where people build not just homes, but futures,